Well, thank you so much. We've been trying to get you for so long. I'm so glad you're there, and really good to see you. And we're going to bring in now
Thank you. Thank you,
Sanjana, Dr. Sanjana Hattatua, who was a well-known disinformation researcher. Sanjana, sorry to keep you waiting, and I hope you're in good form there in Colombo and Sri Lanka.
Yeah, it's all good. Kia ora.
Excellent.
Hi, Robert.
Bernard, do you want to take the lead for the moment with Sanjana? I've been talking to him offline, and you were keen to get him on.
Yes, thank you so much, Sanjana, for coming on. It's lovely to see you. I've been watching your research for many years, and it's helped inform me about the things that, on the face of it, are very surprising around our discussion on all sorts of things, including vaccines and mandates and treaty issues and various other things. I'm always surprised. You've come up with a piece in the last couple of days collating your research on the rise of the far right since the general election. Could you tell us a bit more about what you've found in the last 2.5 years with this government in place in terms of how confident, open, effective some of the far-right voices have been?
Hey, thanks, guys, for having me. I don't know whether I caught you correctly when you said that you were surprised by my research, or maybe that's my own little hole that I'm in, where I'm never surprised at what I study and see, which is quite unfortunate. But I don't think why it should be quite surprising, Bernard, to be honest, because the Helen Clark Foundation and many others have been articulating similar positions and putting out quite a bit of evidence to this effect. And this latest report actually is in response to an RNZ article a couple of days ago, which quoted, I think, a well-known strategic and security analyst, Chris Kumera. And Chris is a great guy, and we have been in touch over the years. And I wanted to locate what he said in that piece against the research that I've been looking at and how I've been looking at it for a number of years now, but particularly under the current government after the election in 2023. Anybody can go and read it. It's public research. There are 9 pathologies is what I call it, but the way to understand it is just like a virus spreads, there are 9 ways that what I have studied has at an accelerated speed spread in polity and society. Listen, it's not good. It's the simplest way of putting it. Listeners are I don't think have enough time for me to go into the report in detail. I look at 9 particular ways, 9 communities, 9 narrative frames that the communities, identities, and various issues and aspects and subjects and developments and topics in New Zealand have been targeted by far-right discourse. And I suppose what will be most interesting, Bernard, for you and the listeners will be the most disturbing aspect of it all, which is why I really framed it in that time, given what we are heading into November this year, which is that I think it is indubitable, given the evidence that I have presented, that there is a permission structure created by the current government for the far right's encroachment into public discourse. That is not good. It is not to say that the far right hasn't existed and shouldn't exist, or there's some halcyon past where democracy was perfect. But there is an indubitable case based on the evidence that the door has been opened for that language, those narratives, those words, that rhetoric, that targeting, that awful way of speaking, that awful way of seeing the world, seeing ourselves, seeing the country and our future and certain people's place in it, in a language that is associated with Trumpism, white supremacism, Christian nationalism, neo-Nazism, and everything that has been, and I say this quite explicitly, and I end it there, I think on page 12 or 11, I say this quite explicitly, which is that I inhabit a bizarre place where I can read what New Zealanders cannot. And I'm referring specifically to, I won't mention the name, but the Christchurch terrorists, quote unquote, manifesto. As a consequence of academics and researchers like myself reading that and studying it, what is really disturbing is that point for point, idea for idea, narrative for narrative, target for target, and sometimes word for word, what's in the Christchurch Terrorists Manifesto is now articulated and broadcast on far-right podcast stations week on week, month after month, year after year. And when you come to people like Shane Jones, regrettably, he uses the same language that resonates with what the Christchurch killer flagged as the Great Replacement. When you talk about a tsunami of butter chicken, or a sort of a great replacement, that is exactly, and surprisingly, even for me, the language that is very present and defines the Christchurch Killers Manifesto. So that encapsulates, in a sense, what this report brings out. It's not good. And I also go on to look at what we call path dependencies, which is a simpler way of putting it, is what the future of New Zealand may look like if these trends and these patterns and these pathologies were to continue.
Yeah, Sanjana, when I say surprised, I was surprised, for example, at the time of the parliamentary occupation in Wellington, watching a march go down the street at Lambton Quay, and seeing, and this was not long after the Russian full invasion of Ukraine, watching people waving Russian flags in a march down Lambton Quay towards the Parliament, with signs talking about globalization and woke politicians, and being quite sort of violent and extremist in their language, which I had never seen before. And what has surprised me in the years since is reading your research to see how deeply embedded this has become, but also a piece of research that came out of Microsoft about the Russian propaganda index, and how the Russian troll farms had flooded New Zealand, but 30% more than in other countries. How much of this stuff is actually being fed from sources overseas that are organised and have a strategy?
Hey, look, this is a hot button issue, right? And Peter and Bernard, I'm happy to say that this is an exclusive reveal into a report that I'm currently working on, I think, which will be the first of its kind coming out of New Zealand, looking at Russian disinformation pathologies from the parliamentary protest time onwards. As Bernard, you said, it was coterminous with the aggression in Ukraine for the second time. I mean, not the 2014 aggression, but Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And so I have studied it quite deeply, and I think it's time that report was released and that research was released to give a more grounded perspective around the degree to which your question is a vital one. Everybody refers to the Microsoft research and report, and yes, I know of it, and it's really quite worrying the degree to which it flagged how New Zealand was exposed to Russian disinfo well before the events of the parliamentary protests and what happened in front of the Beehive and what have you. It's got worse over time. So the answer to you is threefold. One is, this is a transnational discourse that is being exported with a Kremlin template or blueprint, if you want, has been until recently adopted by folks like Viktor Orban and Duterte and other leaders as well. Farage is a contemporary leader who articulates much the same talking points. All of this is a free flow of narratives that New Zealand isn't magically inoculated against. And as I said, the tragedy is that the government isn't a strong enough bulwark that rejects this kind of rhetoric and accepts it, and moreover actually articulates it, actually says it. So that's one problem. So we are a sponge to what has grown in volume, velocity, and virulence. The other is Trumpism, far-right politics rise around the world. AfD in Germany. We don't know what's going to happen with the presidential elections in France next year. Robert Packman might be able to give you a better idea when he comes on the program next time around. And of course, Mr. Trump in the United States, exporting all of what was once fringe lunacy and white supremacism, now is mainstreamed into White House discourse and policies, politics and practices. And then finally, algorithms.
Go ahead.
Social media algorithms have now aligned themselves by kissing the ring in the United States, and what was once guardrails in these platforms, respectively, around this kind of rhetoric, is now much more open to the free fall within platforms and between platforms. So a combination of all of these has worsened the information landscape and has resulted in the far-right discourse permeating political speech and coming into the dashboards or the news feeds of many, many, many more New Zealanders over the past 2.5 years.
Sanjana, could you address the inevitable question that some of it from our audience at the moment about is this just as bad on the left, and is the right just as bad as the left? And how do we address the free speech argument, which often gets trailed out here? And we even have people here saying, "Just is this just because you're a bunch of lefties poking at the right?" And that's talking to Bernard and me rather than you. How do we address this aspect of discourse and the free speech one, please? I mean, the free speech union is often connected to this, and what's going on there, please?
Well, I've been called much less charitable things. I'll be glad to be called, whatever you two have been called. But hey, look, the freedom of speech is what I would like to call it. I mean, I don't subscribe to free speech. There is, however, something called the freedom of speech, articulated as a fundamental right in the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. That is what we subscribe to. And in the world that we live in, with the information ecologies as we have it, that does not mean freedom of reach. That does not mean that there are no consequences for what you say. And that does not mean that political leaders have no responsibility around what they say and how they say it. So I go back to the three individuals that I've named in this report, David Seymour, Winston Peters, and Shane Jones. These are senior politicians. I mean, they are not some young backbenchers with no experience who shoot their mouth off at any given one point of time. They are very deliberate in what they say. Mr. Peters has a very specific cadence. He speaks in a certain way. Same with Seymour and same with Shane Jones. They know what they say, and they say it to a constituency they know it will resonate in. And that is the basic template for the far right. They know what they say, but they couch it in a way that suggests that this is normal, that it is just questioning, that they have a right to speak. But ultimately, the people that they accuse of being snowflakes are not. And they themselves are the snowflakes when they are questioned around the consequences around what they say and how they say it. And they are, if you take a look at Trump, I mean, it's quite bizarre, really, the censoriousness of that regime. If you take a look at any of these, Orban or Duterte in the Philippines, any of these leaders who hitch the flag on the free speech hoist it, they are the most censorious, algorithmically. And now take a look at the press freedom tanking in the United States, right? So we need to push back on this facile, lazy argument that suggesting what the evidence brings out is in any way, shape or form an affront to anybody's ability to say what they want to without consequence, without responsibility, and particularly when it comes to the political class and political leadership. Political leadership matters, and what political leaders say matters. It always has, and it always should matter, that they don't adopt the same narratives and the language of what brought grief and trauma in March 2019 to New Zealand. I'll put it as bluntly as that.
Sanjana, thank you so much. We're going to have one more question, please. We have what we call the final question, because Bernard's going to do a brief soliloquy at the end about the budget and the goings on in the Prime Minister's office. But you talk also in your piece, and this is slightly inside baseball, given that we're both media people, Bernard and me. You talk about something called in the same way you talk about permission, you talk about the grievance media. in New Zealand, we've also had, big fallen media and conventional media trust, traditional media trust, and we know that the funding of media by the government during COVID, has had a huge backlash. Tell us what you mean by this grievance media, just to close this conversation, please.
Well, in the report, I make the point that Mr. Peters, I think as far back or as far early into the government as November 2023, targeted the PIJF very, very specifically, named it, and said that that was a reason why the media was captured by the left or by Labour or what have you. So yes, there is a radical decline in trust in mainstream media. AUT's year-on-year reporting suggests this. There's a slight increase this year, but globally speaking, that is the case. And now you have this word called newsfluencers, where individuals who have very large audiences seem to get more trust and engagement than Peter or a Bernard, right? Or an RNZ or a TVNZ or a CNN or a BBC or a Al Jazeera. So that's a global phenomenon. And what I call grievance media or grievance communities is that these platforms, networks, actors and stations exist to exacerbate, amplify performative anger and grievance. And it is through that other vital issues like the environment or green futures or the fact that there is incredible homelessness in New Zealand, or the fact that economically the country isn't doing well. So vital issues are marginalized, and grievance around emotive, hot button issues through performative anger is weaponized. And that's a daily churn. And that is what I call, and in the report, so that listeners know, I go into this a bit in more detail. And there's much else that has been written on this as well. Essentially, it is dividing societies from within by creating echo chambers that these communities like to be angry or very emotively engaged with, and the result of that is that larger, more important issues are ignored. By the way, and let me say the final point, that is, if you study the Kremlin disinformation blueprint, disinformatia, that is a core pillar around how they eviscerate liberal democracies by creating divisions within societies.
Sanjana, thank you so much for that. We try to stay calm and cool. Go ahead, Bernard. Go, Bernard.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you on the show, and we will link to your report from this week, and we very much would like to include your coming report on disinformation and the parliamentary protests when it comes up, and make sure it gets as much airtime as we can give it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Good to see you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjana. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bernard, do you want to close, please?
Yeah, it's been quite a day here in Wellington, and I have so enjoyed the Hoon today, going out of New Zealand, but in a way that's incredibly relevant and useful. And I look forward to a quiet evening. And I'm Bernard Hickey for the Kaka. That has been another Hoon. We look forward to seeing you all next week at 5 o'clock. Peter, thank you so much from the other side of the world. Wonderful to chat, and thank you so much for bringing in our guests this week.
Thanks very much, Bernard, and thank you, everybody, especially Chill Pill. See you, Bernard. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Simon,
Bye-bye.
our producer.
Yeah. Bye-bye.